A New Mexico mom heads to work on a normal Thursday, but she never makes it inside.
All her stuff is here in the house, but she's not here, and it's just not like her to not call work to check in and take her purse and her phone.
She disappears, leaving behind her car, keys, medication, and both cell phones.
For a number of reasons, I don't think she left on her own.
Months later, her remains are recovered on secluded federal land, where a private investigator discovers a treasure trove of evidence only after the official crime scene is closed.
I think everybody was pretty blown away when they started finding what they found.
And soon her workplace comes to the forefront of the investigation.
Something was going on that we are just not privy to.
This is Scandal, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Sierra.
On a June morning in New Mexico, a woman named Melissa Casias dropped her husband off at work like she did almost every day. A few hours later, she was gone. Not missing in the way you'd expect, either. Her car was still parked in the driveway. Her purse, her ID, her daily medication, all untouched inside the house. Both of her cell phones had been wiped back to factory settings. Every photo and message erased. For the next 11 months, nobody knew where she was. Then, in the spring of 2026, a hiker walking through a remote stretch of national forest stumbled on human remains. They belonged to Melissa. But instead of closing the case, that discovery opened up a whole new set of questions. Questions her own family says still haven't been answered. Melissa Casias was 53 years old, married to her husband Mark for 2 decades, and the mother of a daughter named Sierra. The family lived in Ranchos de Taos, a small community about an hour outside Los Alamos, New Mexico, home to one of the most secretive research facilities in the country, the Los Alamos National Laboratory. Both Melissa and Mark worked there, commuting together most days. Mark on the technical side, Melissa as an administrative assistant, handling scheduling and paperwork rather than classified research. By most accounts, she wasn't someone with access to sensitive information, though reports later surfaced that her security clearance had been reduced at some point before she vanished, for reasons that were never made public. Outside of work, Melissa and Mark were known as outdoors people, experienced hunters who spent weekends together in the mountains.
Recently lost some of her clearance at the lab.
She was an administrative assistant at Los Alamos, and reportedly she was having some issues at work. I don't know what those issues are, but something did result in her losing her clearance at one point. So I don't know if her family, her family is ruling nothing out, but I don't necessarily think that they think it's connected to classified information because she lost her clearance. I think it could be, a range of things, I guess. She was responsible, for setting up meetings, for, documentation, getting that into the right hands. But her family, at least the family I spoke to, they didn't know too much about her day to day. I will say, Melissa was, or seemingly was, per her Facebook, an avid hunter. I believe that at one point she and her husband had a YouTube channel about, their hunting excursions, and they had a business. I did do a background check, and I was perplexed at one point about just a plethora of P.O. boxes, but upon
who reportedly ran a small side business connected to that hobby. To everyone around her, she was, in her family's words, a devoted mother and a steady presence. Not someone anyone expected to simply disappear. June 26, 2025 started like any other Thursday. Melissa dropped Mark off at the lab around 6:15 in the morning, the same routine they'd followed countless times. But instead of heading to her own post that day, she turned the car around and drove the hour back home. When Sierra found her there around 7:45, Melissa explained that she'd forgotten her work badge. It's a small detail, but one that's puzzled people close to the case ever since. Employees who forget a badge at Los Alamos typically just get a temporary one at the security gate. There was no obvious reason for an hour-long round trip home. Just before 1 p.m., Melissa showed up at Sierra's workplace to drop off lunch. Her daughter would later describe her as maybe a little quieter than usual, but nothing that raised alarm at the time. A little over an hour later, at 20:18 p.m., a family acquaintance spotted her walking alone along Highway 5 on 18, heading east, wearing a backpack. Security footage from a nearby business confirmed the sighting. That was the last confirmed glimpse of Melissa Casias. When Mark's shift ended, Melissa never came to pick him up. A co-worker drove him home instead. Everything there looked normal, almost too normal. Her car sat in the driveway. Her purse, her ID, her wallet, and her daily medication were all inside, untouched. Both of her cell phones were there too, but completely wiped and reset to factory settings.
Melissa missing.
We cannot locate my wife. We haven't heard from her all day from work. It was this morning was the last time I saw her work. My daughter saw her around 1 o'clock. All her stuff is here in the house, but she's not here, and it's just not like her to not call work to check in and take her purse and her phone.
Upon closer inspection, both of Melissa's phones have been wiped. completely reset back to factory settings.
Looks like her phone has been, my daughter says it looks like it's been reset, but so we looked all around the house, everywhere on our property. We cannot find her or nothing, and I don't know what to do. The car that she was in is parked here at the house. The keys are here. The house was locked. Everything is here. You know what I mean? So she went from the plaza. She came home. The car was here, parked in the yard. The keys are on the kitchen table.
What's her name?
Melissa Casias. And we called the hospital to see because, I mean, if there's no one in there, at all like that, because we thought, well, maybe if something happened to her, her purse and everything's here, so no one would be able to identify her.
And you said what she took was her phone?
She didn't take nothing. That's the thing, is her phone and everything's here, and she always takes her stuff with her. My daughter was trying to track her location, and they always tracked each other. But her phone's wiped. The thing is, what we can't get, and she would never have wiped all the pictures off and all the information off.
Mark called police that evening. Melissa Casias was officially reported missing. In the days that followed, investigators found no immediate evidence of foul play, and early statements floated the idea that Melissa may have left on her own. Mark and Sierra leaned toward that explanation. Melissa's parents, her sister, and her niece pushed back hard, insisting she would never walk away from her daughter without a word, and certainly not while leaving behind medication she needed daily and a phone stripped of every photo and message it held. That disagreement opened a rift inside the family that would shadow the case for the next year. One side convinced she'd chosen to disappear, the other convinced something had been done to her. Around the same time, Melissa's story got pulled into a much bigger, murkier narrative, a string of at least 10 people connected to nuclear, defense, and aerospace research who have died or vanished under strange circumstances in recent years. Online, that fueled everything from espionage theories to talk of an outright cover-up, and it was serious enough that...
Is Melissa's disappearance related to those other missing scientists?
It's hard to say no because there's commonalities. I mean, the state of New Mexico itself, I'd say, is a big commonality here. And the fact that, there have been another employee specifically that went missing. He was retired from Los Alamos, but he went missing. Melissa missing. General Neil McCaslin, I mean, he had connections to the Department of Defense, of course. He worked there. He went missing in New Mexico. I mean, I could keep going. It's just like I have a hard time here because I did hear from the New Mexico State Police last week, and this is pertaining to McCaslin. This was, I heard on Friday, they said to me, there is nothing currently to support General McCaslin being linked to any other missing scientist. And I was like, oh, you seem very sure about that. Have you spoken to other agencies? Have you, what's going on? And I asked specifically, have you spoken to agencies in Los Angeles, Los Alamos? All they said back was, yes, we've spoken to other agencies. And at the moment, we don't see any connections. At the moment, I don't know, but they won't get into it.
A congressional committee eventually asked federal investigators for more information. To be clear, no law enforcement agency has confirmed a link between Melissa's case and these others, but
my opinion initially, before being involved and seeing that many people involved on the list of scientists around the country or folks that have worked for labs, that yes, there seemed to be some strong correlation of that many people going missing and having that have a major impact on this case because she worked for the national labs. But then after getting involved and learning more, I don't suspect that it's part of some larger conspiracy. I will say that on the local side to it, that there have been a number of calls that have suggested some local conspiracy in the governmental side of things. And when I say conspiracy, individuals that have called alleging people being paid off in certain situations. And I don't believe in anything until you see it and you can corroborate it yourself. But some of these calls have led to additional rabbit holes, so to speak, in terms of investigations that we've done that would make me want to dive very deeply into some of these local conspiracies that have been suggested. So our hope, of course, is that law enforcement does talk to those individuals so we have a clear understanding as to whether or not the information they can provide is accurate.
Her employer and the timing were enough to keep that theory very much alive. 11 months passed with no sign of Melissa. Then, on May 28, 2026, a hiker in the Carson National Forest.
This hiker that found her, I said, is this specific area, these coordinates, is it heavily populated? No. It is very, very remote. I even got chills saying that. Very desolate, because Carson National Forest is millions of acres. It is like, I think I saw, and when I was researching, it's like 2 or 3 times the state of Rhode Island, this national forest. And this specific area where she was found, it's remote. Let's just put it that way. You can access this area through Highway 518 where Melissa was last seen walking. So this area can be accessed that way, but again, you got to go pretty far. It's not right off the highway by any means at all. So it's
a wilderness area so vast and remote that reaching parts of it without supplies is genuinely difficult, came across human remains. A handgun was found lying nearby. 2 days later, the Office of the Medical Investigator confirmed what the family had feared: the remains were Melissa's. The official cause and manner of death, though, were listed as undetermined.
To the New Mexico State Police on Monday. And, before this, I had been very impressed with their response time. They were quick. They were engaging with me. They were saying, it was the PIO I was talking to, and she's like, I'm getting all these answers for you. And this was about a week ago, when I first reported about there being no projectiles in her skull. But I saw all of this info and I was like, oh no, I got to know why they missed this. But it's like you said, I mean, maybe they didn't think it was important, but I don't know why. Maybe they were, and again, this is just speculation. I don't think law enforcement works like this, but maybe they saw the scene and they said, suicide. We don't need to do anything further. I mean, right? Especially when you had the narrative for a very long time that Melissa, quote, left on her own. So I feel like
an early forensic scan reportedly found no evidence of a gunshot wound to the skull. For most families, a discovery like this might mark the start of closure. For Melissa's, it marked the start of a new fight, because they soon learned the exact site where her remains were found had already been searched once by authorities and had turned up nothing, with frustration mounting.
And that is a huge bombshell. Melissa's remains were discovered by a random hiker in an area that was already searched. It was around the same time that Melissa's family reached out to David Adams for help.
I was retained by the maternal side of the family, the parents of Melissa and the sister. And I've investigated a lot of prior murder cases, specifically missing murder Indigenous women cases in the past. And I'm a prior federal prosecutor that focused on just crimes against women as well in my past job. So oftentimes I present at conferences around the country. And in one situation, an investigator was at the conference and connected me with the family. And I learned pretty quickly that just based upon the things I'd seen in the investigation, that I could be helpful in trying to have some oversight on it and hopefully try to build some momentum to have the right things done since it was still inactive.
The family brought in an attorney and a volunteer search and rescue team to comb the site themselves. What they found troubled them: additional possible bone fragments, strands of hair, torn scraps of paper.
Carson National Forest, where Melissa's remains were discovered, and no one could have expected what they uncovered.
Yeah, so what happened was that law enforcement contacted the family after Melissa was found and provided the coordinates as to where she was, and indicated that the crime scene was open and released and there was nothing else to be done. So the family, along with a Four Corners search and rescue team, went up to the area to just kind of see where she was last, not expecting really to find anything. And I think everybody was pretty blown away when they started finding what they found, including, bones, of course, that a dog, had at least gave indication that it could be human bones, based upon the training of the dog, but that'll be determined by the anthropologist. And the paper itself, some things that we identified as being possible biological material, blood in the ground. Her clothing, seemingly that was also in shreds. There were some parts of the clothing that appeared to have possible blood in it as well. A shoestring up there. A wrapper is up there as well. And so every single thing that could put some type of DNA analysis and attached to somebody or something, I think is super, super important in cases like this when otherwise there isn't any other evidence. So that crime scene is vital.
Pieces of clothing that appeared to those searching to carry stains that could be blood, all sitting in an area law enforcement had already processed and released as a closed scene. That raised an uncomfortable question now sitting at the center of this
Have
case.
stated that they've left messages on the tip line hoping for callbacks, not necessarily smoking gun type of information, but certainly information that would be valuable in conducting a complete investigation for a case that made national news when it came to somebody that went missing that worked at some federal labs. And so there's certainly an expectation that this should be done with way more thorough expertise when it comes to the crime side to it. But nonetheless, given the fact that she was working at an area that has been of national attention in many different past occasions, you certainly would want to pay attention to it. And frankly, given the fact that she was found on federal land and had that job, I would have suspected and hoped that the FBI would have been involved at least in some of the initial investigation. And to my understanding, they weren't involved in going to where she was found and hasn't been doing a whole lot in this case. And I would have hoped that they would have been more involved given those
ongoing.
Initially, law enforcement response was that, wow, this is surprising because we think we've got 95% of all of Miss Melissa's remains with us. And so it was surprising to see anything found up there because I understand that there was at least 7 people from the law enforcement team that had investigated this crime scene, which I think they would all attest to being super tired and worn out by the time they got there just because of the actual terrain to get there. But it's definitely concerning that they were a little nonchalant about all the belongings found up there, like it wasn't so significant. And having reviewed cases where families have been deprived of that opportunity to really forensically analyze materials that have been found at crime scene, and how that could definitely cause a situation where you don't get justice or accountability. You just don't want to see any mistakes. And so, the way that I understand the analysis should be taking place is that some of those findings will be provided to the Office of the Medical Investigator, and some of those findings will remain with law enforcement for them to do another analysis. But most of it went to OMI. In fact, I had contacted the attorney for OMI just to make sure that there was a clear understanding that this was found and that they were going to be taking this in as evidence as well. And so that did take place, and they did come and gather all of the evidence and take pictures of that evidence at the office.
I did not confirm that myself with the OMI, but per the law firm, they believe that this is all going into, the same evidence storage for testing with the gun, with her bones, etc.
I would